Montana Territory, July 1873, the blood trail started just past the creek that ran behind the Evans homestead, thick and dark against the dry brush. Violet Evans had only come out to check on the goats, but now her boots were soaked through, her heart racing as she crouched near the water's edge, staring at the still figure lying half-shaded beneath a cottonwood tree. He was a man bare-chested, his skin dark with dust and blood, his long black hair matted to his face. An arrow was broken off near his ribs and his breaths were shallow, uneven. He looked like he had collapsed mid-crawl, his hands dug into the dirt. Violet dropped to her knees beside him. "Sir," her voice cracked. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, but he did not speak. She recognized his dress-beaded leather leggings, feathers tangled in his braid. Lakota. Every warning her father had ever spoken rose up in her mind like wildfire. But that man had died 3 winters ago, and Violet had learned since then that not all warnings were truths. She steadied herself. "You're hurt. I need to move you." He didn't respond, but he didn't resist either. She wrapped her arms beneath his shoulders and pulled. It took every bit of strength in her slim frame to drag him through the brush to the back of the barn, where no one from the trail could see. Her hands shook fiercely as she laid him down in the straw. Her mother's old trunk, what was left of it, held the bandages and herbs Violet had taught herself to use after the fever took her mother and baby brother 2 years ago. She worked in silence, cutting away blood-soaked leather, cleaning the wound as gently as she could. His skin twitched under her fingers, but he did not wake. By the time she had stitched the gash along his side, the sun was low. The goats bleated restlessly nearby, but Violet stayed kneeling by the stranger, watching his chest rise and fall. His face was strong and proud, even in pain. There was something in his jawline, the way his forehead creased, that made her feel like he was made of stone and fire all at once. When his eyes finally opened, it was near dusk. He stared at her, confused but not afraid. "You are, settler," he said, voice rough. She nodded. "I live here." "You were bleeding bad. I had to help." He blinked slowly. Why? Violet didn't have an answer for that, not one that would make sense, because no one else would. He looked away then, but not before she caught the pain in his eyes that had nothing to do with his wounds. "My name is Violet Evans," she said. "What's yours?" He hesitated. Then Ehan, she repeated it softly. "Ehan Wicasa," he added after a moment. "I am chief of my people," her breath hitched, "a Lakota chief, and she had hidden him in her barn." "You can't stay here long," she said, voice low. "If anyone finds you, they won't ask questions." "I know," he murmured, "but I cannot walk far yet." "I will keep you safe," she said, surprising even herself. The next days passed slowly. Ehan's fever came and went. Violet kept him clean, fed, hidden. She brought him broths, fed him with a spoon when his hands trembled too much. She made up stories to tell to the few people who passed by, traders, hunters, neighbors checking in. No one saw Ehan. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. He told her of a raid gone wrong, a skirmish near the Yellowstone River. He had split from his band to draw soldiers away and had taken the arrow in his side before escaping into the hills. "You should hate me," he said one night, his voice barely above the wind. "Your people have lost much to mine." "And yours to mine," she replied, keeping her eyes on the fire she had lit in the hearth. "But I do not hate you." He watched her for a long time. "You are not like others," she shrugged. "Maybe I am just tired of being alone." He said nothing, but she felt the shift in the air between them. It was 2 weeks before Ehan could stand without help. Violet was brushing out her mare in the early morning when she heard the barn door creak. She turned to find him leaning against the frame, his chest bandaged, his breathing measured. "You should not be up yet," she said, brushing straw from her skirt. "I needed to see the sky," he said. "And you," she looked at him then, really looked. His eyes were dark but not cold. There was a gentleness there that he did not try to hide. "I owe you my life," Ehan said, "but I do not want to leave it behind." Her heart thudded. "You will not be safe if you stay." "I will not be whole if I go." Violet stepped closer, her throat dry. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he said. "Enough to say my heart is not mine anymore." She reached for his hand, and he took it, careful but sure. His fingers were warm, rough with scars, but steady. She looked up into his face and saw the truth of it there, this man who had come to her on the edge of death, who now stood before her with something like hope in his eyes. "I never believed in fate," she whispered. "Neither did I," he said. "Until you." She leaned in slowly, giving him time to pull back. He did not. Their foreheads touched first, then their lips. The kiss was soft, almost unsure but real. And it filled something in her she had not even known was empty. He pulled back just enough to whisper, "Let me stay." "With you," and she nodded, tears rising. Yes, the sun rose behind them, lighting the sky in gold. And in that quiet moment, with the world still and the barn creaking around them, Violet Evans and Ehan Wicasa stood together, not as settler and Lakota, not as wounded and healer, but as two hearts finding a place to belong. The first frost rolled in early that year, curling at the edges of the tall grass like a slow breath. Violet stepped outside with a shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, the morning air sharp against her cheeks. Smoke from the chimney thinned into the pale sky, and behind her, inside the house, Ehan moved with quiet purpose, setting kindling near the stove like he'd always belonged there. He'd begun helping in small ways, carrying water, mending the fence, stacking what little wood she had split. His strength had returned, but he never pushed past what his body allowed. He knew the land better than she did, though he walked it with care, never straying far. Every step he took seemed to consider the weight of it. "Your mare's favoring her back leg," he said as he came out behind her. "I saw it near the trough." "I noticed," she replied, pulling the shawl tighter. "She's old. I think this winter might be hard on her." "I can make a poultice," he offered. "If there's willow bark." "There is." "In the root cellar, bottom shelf." He nodded and went to gather it without another word. Violet watched him go, the way he moved measured, deliberate. His coat hung a little loose on him, patched with her stitching, but he wore it without complaint. He never asked for more than what was offered. That evening they sat by the fire, the only sound the low creak of the wind pressing against the walls. Violet sewed a tear in her work dress while Ehan carved a length of pine into something she couldn't yet make out. "Do you miss them?" she asked, eyes on her needle. He didn't look up. "Every day. Do they know you're alive?" "No," he said. "It's better that way for now. Will you go to them?" "I don't know yet." She set her sewing down. "You could send word. I'd ride with you if it came to that." He paused the carving, then nodded slowly. "Only if it's safe. There's a trader who passes through every 3 weeks," she said. "Old man, half blind but honest. We could ask him." Ehan didn't answer right away. Instead, he ran his thumb along the fresh edge of the wood. "Would you still want me here if I stayed?" Violet met his eyes. "I want you here even if you don't." His gaze held hers, open and steady. "I've never known peace that didn't feel like waiting for war." She reached across the space between them, fingers brushing his wrist. "Then let's build one that doesn't end." He turned his hand, lacing his fingers with hers. The fire crackled between them, but neither moved. Outside, a coyote cried once, distant and low. Ehan leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. It wasn't a kiss, but it held the same weight. Later, when the lamp was trimmed and the fire burned low, she lay awake listening to the wind. From the corner of the room, Ehan's breath was even, steady. He'd taken to sleeping on a quilt near the hearth, though she hadn't asked him to. He told her once that it felt wrong to share a bed before the right words were spoken. She hadn't argued. The next morning, Violet found a pair of rabbit pelts stretched and drying behind the barn. Ehan had gone before dawn again, leaving no sound behind him, but his work lingered. Traps he checked, snares reset, tracks followed. He wasn't just passing through anymore. He was folding himself into her days. She was gathering eggs when she heard the slow creak of wagon wheels on the main trail. Dust rose behind the ridge and she ducked instinctively, heart thudding. Ehan appeared a few moments later, bow slung across his back, expression unreadable. One man, no uniform, wagons old. She stepped out from the henhouse, brushing dirt from her palms. Could be Micah. "He usually brings flour and nails." "Keep behind me," Ehan said, and she didn't argue. The wagon pulled to a stop just as they reached the edge of the path. A man with a gray beard and a wide-brimmed hat tipped his head toward them, eyes squinting. "Miss Evans," he called, "got your order." "Wasn't sure you'd still be here." "Still here, Micah," she answered, stepping forward slowly. "You made good time." Micah glanced at Ehan, raising one brow but saying nothing. You got help now, this is Ehan, she said evenly. He's staying on a while. Micah nodded once, slow and deliberate. Fair enough, got your sack of flour, nails, and some dried peaches. Trade's still good. Yes, she said, same as before. He unloaded the goods without comment. Ehan helped, silent but firm in his presence. When the wagon turned back toward the trail, Micah called over his shoulder, "Weather's turning early this year. You two take care." As the dust settled, Violet let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He didn't ask questions, she said. He will next time, Ehan replied. But he didn't today, she turned to him. He's kind, and he owes my father a favor. That goes a long way out here. Ehan nodded, then glanced up at the clouds gathering in the west. Snow's coming. We'll be ready. They stood side by side, watching the horizon. The air smelled of cold earth and wood smoke. There was no need to speak. Every day now, their lives wound more tightly together like threads pulled from opposite ends, meeting at the center. The first snow came in the night, soft and quiet, blanketing the dry land with a stillness that muffled even the wind. When Violet stepped outside at dawn, the world looked gentler than it had any right to. The fields were cloaked in white, the fence posts traced with frost. She pressed her palm to the porch rail, feeling the cold bite through her skin, and then turned toward the barn where Ehan's footprints were already dark against the snow. Inside, he was bent over a leather strap, his breath fogging in the cold air. He didn't look up when she entered, but his voice was calm. The mare walked easier this morning. I saw, she replied, closing the door behind her. Did the poultice help? It eased the swelling, but her time's running short. Violet leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I've been thinking about what comes next, not just winter, after. Ehan tied off the leather and set it aside. You mean spring, she nodded. If you stay, we'll need more seed. I've only enough for one plot. I can hunt through snow, Ehan said. Game moves differently, but it moves. That's not what I meant, she said, voice quieter now. I meant if you stay for good. He turned then. His face was unreadable but not distant. I've been thinking too, she waited. There's a woman in my band who leads the winter lodge. Her word carries weight. If I send a message, she'll know how to speak for me. What would you ask her to say? That I've chosen a life here, that I'm not lost, not taken, that I've found something worth honoring. Violet felt her chest rise, slow and full. Would they believe her? They'll believe me if I write it in my own hand. She stepped forward, boots crunching faintly on the straw. You can write, I learned years ago. From a Jesuit near Fort Randall, he thought it would help keep peace. It didn't. He glanced down. But it stayed with me. She reached out and touched his shoulder. Do you want me to bring Micah again? Before the pass ices over, Ehan nodded. If he agrees to carry the letter, I'll trust it'll find the right hands. They stood in silence a while, wrapped in the breath of livestock and hay. Then Violet asked, what was your home like? Before everything changed, Ehan's eyes softened. There's a ridge near the river bend where the buffalo used to trail. We'd camp close in spring when the calves were young. The grass there grows tall as a man's chest. My brother and I used to race through it, trying to catch the wind. She smiled faintly. I used to hide under the back porch during storms. I thought if I stayed still enough, the thunder wouldn't find me. We both learned to run from the sky, he said. Their eyes met. Neither looked away. That evening, Ehan sat at the kitchen table, a candle flickering beside him while Violet watched from the doorway. He held the pencil like it was carved from bone, delicate, reverent. His handwriting was tight and angled, each word deliberate. When he finished, he folded the paper and tied it with a strip of hide. He handed it to her. You trust him? I do. He sees more than he says. I'll walk it to him myself. She hesitated. You sure? I want to look him in the eye when I ask. They rode out together 2 mornings later, wrapped in furs and silence. Micah was camped by the ridge, warming his hands over a pot of coffee. He didn't flinch when Ehan approached, didn't say much at all, just took the letter, nodded once, and said he'd do what was asked. The ride back was slower. The snow had deepened, and the trees creaked under its weight. At one point, Violet's mare stumbled, and Ehan dismounted, walking beside her the rest of the way without being asked. When they reached the house, the sky was dim with dusk. Inside, the fire was low, but the room held the kind of warmth that lingered. You never asked what I wrote, Ehan said, peeling off his coat. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. He folded the coat over a chair. I told them I've chosen this land, and the woman who tends it. Violet looked at him, her breath catching. Not from surprise, but from the weight of what it meant. I don't want to live as a shadow, he said, or a guest. I want to build something that can't be undone by wind or steel. She stepped toward him, slow and sure. Then build it with me. Ehan cupped her face, his hands warm from riding. Will you have me? I already do. He kissed her then, not hesitating, not unsure. It was quieter than any promise she'd ever known, but it bound something between them that had already taken root. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady. Inside, they began again. The letter came back tucked into a fold of cotton, stitched beneath a strip of tanned hide. Micah handed it over without ceremony, wiping his hands on his coat as he stepped back from the porch. No one followed, he said. Didn't see a soul past the river fork. Ehan nodded, taking the bundle with both hands. He didn't open it until Micah's wagon creaked out of sight, snow muffling the wheels. Violet stood beside him in the kitchen, the fire low, the kettle humming faintly on the stove. Ehan unwrapped the cloth on the table, fingers moving slow, reverent. Inside was a single sheet, folded tight, and a small braid of sweetgrass bound with sinew. He read in silence, lips barely moving. When he was done, he laid the page flat and turned toward her. She says it is well, he said. That I have chosen my own circle now, that I am not cast out only walking a path they cannot follow. Violet stepped closer. What will you do with it? He folded the paper again, neat and square. Keep it. It belongs here now. The next morning, they began clearing the back room, what had once held her father's tools and broken tack. Ehan measured the walls with twine and marked the floor with charcoal, speaking little as he worked. Violet dusted shelves and swept out mouse leavings, her arms aching by midday. By dusk, the stove was moved, the cot set up, and a small window cleared of grime. Ehan hung the braid of sweetgrass above the threshold, tying it in silence. When he was done, he stepped back and looked at her. This room is ours now, he said. Violet touched the frame with her fingertips. It feels different, he nodded once. It should. Snow deepened as the days passed. Ehan built a lean-to for firewood, taught Violet how to read the weight of snow on branches before it fell. She showed him how to preserve eggs in ash and oil, how to dry the last of the apples with cloves and rosemary. They worked without needing to speak much. The rhythm of shared labor shaped their days. One evening, after the wind had died and the world outside lay hushed under stars, they sat close in the kitchen, her head resting against his shoulder. He was carving again, this time a length of ash with a curved edge. She watched the shape emerge slowly, a bird, wings tucked, body bent as if in flight. What's it for? She asked, voice soft. He didn't look up. When a man chooses a new life, he carries a piece of the old with him. This is for the old, so I don't forget. She was quiet a moment. And what about the new? He turned the carving in his palm, then set it down gently between them. I'll make something for that too, when I know what shape it takes. Violet reached for his hand, not to take it, but to trace the line of his knuckles with her thumb. Does it feel like home yet? Ehan's eyes didn't leave hers, not yet, but it doesn't feel like leaving anymore. That night, as they lay beneath the quilt she had sewn from her mother's old dresses, Ehan turned to her, his breath warm against her neck. I want to ask you something, he said. She shifted to face him, the lamp casting gold across his cheek. I want to build with you, he said. Not just live beside you. I want your name in my mouth every morning and your hand in mine when the snow comes heavy. Not as guest, as husband. Violet didn't answer right away. Her heart beat slow and strong, and her fingers curled into the fabric between them. There's no preacher here, she said. My people do not need one to make a promise. She studied him, the quiet certainty in his gaze. Then say it. He sat up and took her hands. I give you my care, my labor, my days. I will carry your sorrows and share your fire. I will not walk ahead or behind, only beside. You are my choice. She swallowed, the words catching in her throat, but her voice was steady. I give you what I have left, my land, my name, my work. I will not turn from you nor send you away. You are my home. They sat together in that stillness, nothing between them now but truth. Later, when the fire had burned low and the room had fallen into quiet, Ehan pulled the quilt up over them and whispered, "Tomorrow we'll mark the door." Violet smiled against his chest. "Let the snow come." By early March, the light began to shift longer in the mornings, softer by evening. The snow that had drifted high against the barn started to pull back, leaving dark veins of earth behind. Ehan stood at the edge of the pasture with a spade in his hand, watching the meltwater curl around his boots. The ground was still frozen a few inches down, but it wouldn't hold much longer. Behind him, Violet knelt by the chicken coop, untangling lengths of winter-warped wire. Her gloves were stiff with old repairs, but she worked without pause. When he approached, she looked up and brushed her sleeve across her cheek, leaving a faint line of mud. "You're quiet today," she said. "I'm thinking about what we'll need come planting," he replied. "If we wait too long, we'll miss the first rain." "We'll have to trade for barley," she said. "I've got dried herbs and one quilt I didn't finish. Might be worth something to the woman near the crossing." "I can take them," he offered. "You've done enough walking this winter." She leaned back on her heels. "I want to go. I need to see how the world's changed since the snow." He nodded, and they agreed to leave after the next thaw. That night, they sat near the hearth, a new map spread across the table. Violet's finger traced the old wagon road that twisted southward, then paused at a small mark tucked near the river bend. "Do you know this area?" she asked. Ehan leaned over her shoulder, studying the faded lines. "There's a grove there, cottonwoods. We used to camp along the edge when the fish ran thick. Could we go there once the frost breaks?" she asked. "I'd like to see it." He turned the map slightly. "It's quiet ground." "You'd like the stillness," she smiled, and he touched her chin gently, eyes lingering. "Maybe we'll plant there too one day." The road south was soft with melt, but the mare moved steady, her limp eased by the warming days. Violet rode with a satchel across her chest, the unfinished quilt wrapped tight inside. Ehan walked beside her, bow slung across his back, his boots wet to the ankles. When they reached the trading post, the air carried the scent of thawing moss and wood smoke. The woman who ran the place met them outside, her hands stained with dye. She studied Violet's bundle, then ran her fingers over the stitching without a word. "I'll take it," she said finally. "And the herbs, you'll get your seed." Violet nodded. "We'll remember." They left with a sack of barley, a small pouch of turnip seed, and a handful of dried onion bulbs. It wasn't much, but it would see them through. On the way back, they camped near a stand of scrub pine where the ground rose enough to stay dry. Ehan built a fire with careful hands, and Violet unpacked their bread and venison. As they ate, the wind shifted, warmer than before. "I never asked," she said, watching the flames. "What made you stop crawling that day?" He looked over at her, his face half-shadowed. "I heard the goats. And then your voice, just after. I thought I was dreaming until you pulled me from the water." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I wasn't sure you'd live." "I wasn't sure I wanted to," he said. "But then I saw the way you looked at me, not afraid, just certain." "I think I was tired of being afraid," she said. "And you looked like someone who'd been carrying too much alone." He rested his cheek against her hair. "Not anymore." Spring came in slow fits of sun and rain. The barley sprouted first, pale green against the dark soil. Ehan built a low fence around the plot, and Violet patched the roof with spare shingles traded from Micah's last pass. The mare passed quietly one morning, lying down near the fence and not rising again. Ehan built a cairn for her in the pasture, and Violet laid a handful of sage at its base. Weeks passed. The days grew longer, the air rich with the scent of thawed earth. One warm morning, Ehan led Violet to the edge of the woods behind the barn, where he'd bent saplings into an arch and hung lengths of carved ash along the sides. She paused at the threshold. "What is this?" "Our place," he said. "For the new shape." He took her hand and stepped beneath the arch. In his other palm, he held a ring made from woven horsehair, dark and smooth. "It's not gold," he said, "but it's strong." She took it with both hands. "Then it's perfect." He slid it over her finger, and she kissed his palm in return. The wind moved through the trees above them, and the carved ash swayed gently, making a soft clicking like distant rain. Later, as they sat on the porch with their feet bare and the sun warm on their faces, Violet laced her fingers with his. "Do you think they'll ever come looking for you?" she asked. "They might," he said. But they'll find me with a name I chose in a home I built with a woman I love. She turned to him. And what will you say? I'll say I found my peace. He touched her cheek. And I'll ask them to sit and stay a while. Years passed. The grove they visited in early spring became a place they returned to every season. Ehan built a small shelter there, open to the wind. Violet planted wildflowers that spread in slow rings. They never had much, but they never lacked. The harvests were lean some years, full in others. They grew old with the land, side by side. When neighbors spoke of them, they spoke gently. Of the woman who stayed on her father's land and the man who came from the hills and never left. Of the pair who never raised their voices but always stood close. Of the love that was not loud but lasting. And in their quiet home beyond the ridge, beneath the same sky that had once watched a wounded man fall, and a solitary woman kneel beside him, Violet and Ehan lived out their days in the kind of peace that does not need to be proven, only shared.